Welcome to the Old Lady Hour with Lorrie and Sheryl. Today's guest is our recurring guest for us, Ryan Phillips of the Tuscaloosa Patch, and he wears many hats, I'm sure, but one of the hats I need to ask you about this morning is congratulations to your father for winning mayor of Northport, which that makes you the first son of Northport.
Yeah, I've been called all sorts of things in the wake of that. I think somebody called me the Prince of Northport,
okay.
which is fine. I'm really excited for him. I was telling somebody the other day that when you look at, and this is just me as a proud son, not the reporter talking, that that each council district, we had some pretty big wins, and I mean we're talking wide margins, 20-30% in some. That's great and wonderful in each district, but when you look at a citywide race with 3 candidates, to get over 60% of the vote like he did, I mean, to me, that's a mandate.
It's really good.
I was really proud to see that. I know he was glad that he didn't have to deal with another month of campaigning. We were, as his family, certainly glad for that. But, I'll tell anybody that the man's a Boy Scout, especially when you stack him up with a heathen like me, that I really do think he does what he says he's going to do. He means what he says. And he's just an absolute teetotaling Boy Scout. I don't think he'll be mad at me at all for speaking out of school.
Oh, well, that's great. I mean, I'm happy for him and for you. And my daughter was in an election for city council in Hoover and did not win in the runoff.
But it was close, though. I remember going to the runoff.
Right, yeah. So it was the last week of that campaign was wild, but that's another story.
It is, and that's a lot of people don't see, what a lot of this politicking does. Like, you just see the 2 candidates who are like the public faces of it. You don't see what their families go through in this. I think I said it on the last time I was on the show that for me, as somebody who was operating this community news outlet before he ever decided to run, that was certainly tough on me from an ethical standpoint. Right. But I mean, I'm glad I handled it the way that I did. I think I came out on the other side, looking above reproach. So it's kind of where you want to be ethically, but that doesn't mean I'm not his kid, right?
Sure.
That I still didn't want to fist fight people who, ran their mouths in the comments. But
well, yeah.
But I do. I think it's a new day for Northport. The thing now, and this is what I've cautioned everybody, including the people who got elected, that just about everybody, doesn't really matter who you are, everybody changes once you get into office. You can sell all you want to on the campaign trail, but 99 times out of 100, the folks who get elected end up becoming a completely different person once they get up there. And I honestly think we're starting to see that a little bit behind the scenes now.
Okay.
I wish I could cover it more, but that's where if I can stand on high from here and, maybe get the message across. Not, again, in no way speaking for my dad on this, because I'd say the same thing to him, that people are watching, and it's like you've made so many promises about things like transparency and cohesion and, like working together for the greater good. Well, now it's time to put up or shut up, or in 4 years, your ass will be out on the street too, and I really think that's what the last group lost sight of. And you can't help but worry that the new group is just going to be a new group of dum-dums who are going to follow the same exact blueprint as the last group. So I implore anybody who's just been sworn in to heed the mistakes of the past group.
And I think it's hard when you go in with ideals and then you're there faced with some realities, which probably are a little more difficult to work with, and you've got to appease a lot of different groups. And
everybody has their own agenda. I mean,
sure.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's not how politics works, but when we ran as this, I say we, I use that in the royal sense, but that when this pack ran kind of as a coalition slate of candidates, folks aren't going to forget that, regardless of, the different schisms that present themselves after the fact once these folks are sworn in. Again, we saw it with the last group. We saw it with the group before that. So, you might be able to fool us. You're not going to be able to fool history with the way that this has gone. So I would hope that this group kind of bucks those trends. And I think when you have a project that has engendered so much bad faith as University Beach has, that maybe that could be the catalyst that really holds this group together.
And speaking of, so what's the current status of, as I call it, Mount Doom?
A big shout out to whoever. I took a picture of the dirt mound that's off McFarland Boulevard after they had sprayed that the grass seed or whatever it was on. It was, hey, the hill's keeping its Christmas spirit with its green color. Right. And somebody came behind me and photoshopped Whoville onto it. So, big ups for finding a sense of humor about that. But we just had, and this is just one of many potentially confusing chapters in this whole saga, is with the bond validation that we just had in circuit court. Right. That, I talked a lot with Judge Pruitt, who presided over it, before and after this. I talked with the district attorney about it. That what I have to just bash into people's skulls that they don't understand is neither of those men, whom I can agree with, I can disagree with, I have immense respect for both of them. But they're both in a position to where all they're doing is tasked with interpreting or enforcing the law.
Right.
That there is no magic wand that Daniel Pruitt or Hayes Webb can wave that makes this go away. That this deal was signed in blood almost 2 years ago at this point.
Right.
So, for anybody to place any blame on them for why the project's moving forward that's just folly to me. It's misplaced blame. And really, it seems like we're getting to the point that now it's going to be put up or shut up for the developers, which I think I said this on the last podcast, that if I was emperor of Northport and I was going to handle it a certain way, I would challenge them to finish it. And then when they don't, I'd take them to court and take their shirt over it. Mm-hmm. I wrote a story probably about a month and a half, 2 months ago, before the bond validation hearing came out, that one of the projects that Kent Donahue, who's one of the main developers on this project he was involved with in Rowlett, Texas, which I've covered extensively, since all this first went down. But it was it's called Sapphire Bay. It was a big tourism type development, not dissimilar to University Beach, but had a massive hotel component. That it burned down before they ever had it's a hotel condominium, I think mixed use, but it burned down before a single tenant moved in. So it was the subject of a federal arson investigation. And then on top of that, you had the deal in Rowlett basically go belly up, and they defaulted on the partnership agreement. So now granted, Donahue has long since pulled himself away from that project, but again, when you're looking at past projects to establish a history of who we're working with, because these aren't local people.
Right, and it looks very sketchy.
It does, and then especially when you stack up that, the not project manager, the cooperative district board manager, who again is another outsider, he's from Mobile, it's a guy named Philip Hunt, that he has a long list of SEC violations. And we're not talking about the Southeastern Conference.
Well, maybe that too.
Maybe so. But it's, and again, these might be fine and good people. I don't know. But all indications from my background research, their lack of public access, willingness to sit down and talk with the public, all those should still be throwing up red flags. But as it stands, I think we're still in the mode where all we can do is challenge them to build it. Right. So, and then even if that fails, they still own the land. So.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate sort of development, but yeah, I understand about the court ruling. There's a contract signed, they have to abide by it. That's really it. So. And
there was a lot of what I thought was kind of undue flack thrown the judge's way. I've dealt with him. Dealt with and dealing with him on multiple cases, so I know him to be nothing but fair, as by the book of a judge as you'll ever see. So, for him to be drawn into this, or for the district attorney to be drawn into it, is just misplaced blame and energy. You want to get mad at the people who got us in this situation, or get mad at the folks who are in a position to do something about it right now, which again is the new council and mayor that we just elected.
And maybe they can come up with something in the meantime. And I'd like to say, I'm not against development at all. No. I think something, and as I said, there's something right next door to our building, which will be changed from office space to a restaurant on the ground floor and condos, and there's a real estate company there too. So, having thriving whatever instead of an empty building is great, even though we've had to go through the demo process.
It's I told somebody else too, though, that, when you look at the past council's mentality, that growth for growth's sake is the mentality of a cancer cell.
Right, that's right.
So
Yeah, it has to be like, is it going to be better or worse? And or as I keep coming up with the phrase, is it an opportunity or a trap?
Right.
And so hopefully, you know, they're looking at the best interest for the people in Northport, same in Tuscaloosa. And, you know, we do have a growing population, which is a lot of opportunities, but it can go the other way pretty
But Northport
fast.
neither has a university nor a beach, so I'm interested, as you know, just from a pure branding standpoint. But that wasn't my decision to call it that.
Yeah.
But I really do think that now we're getting more into the put up or shut up territory.
Sure.
Which, you know, I think that takes some of the onus off the city at the very least.
Right.
But I still think it would be an absolute legal misstep to like take them to court and try to kill this deal outright. I've talked to a few Johnny-come-lately lawyers who have tried to attach themselves to this. And I don't mind calling them down this podcast because I called them that to their faces.
Sure.
You know, that again, where were you 2 years ago when all this came out? No, you're hitching yourself on at the last minute so you can get in front of TV cameras, you can get your name in the paper, you know. That I just don't think that that's a tenable solution when we've already signed the deal in blood. I hate to be so concrete and fatalistic when it comes to like any off ramps we have on this, but I have reported on this inside and out, and I can't see a single way out other than a breach of contract from the developers themselves. So
Okay.
We have a customer coming in.
Just
that's a good time to leave off.
Okay. Hello. Hey. How are you? Good. How are you?
Hey, if you have a YouTube account, you can subscribe to our podcast. Just hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, leave us a comment. We like hearing from you. Thanks.
And we're back. We had to take a little break. We were talking about Northport. And let's talk a little bit about some fun things. Dickens Downtown just happened in downtown Northport. So I was not able to go, but that's always a fun tradition. So next year, you can plan on it. Do you want to say anything about developments there?
Well, I love Dickens Downtown. I've always been a big fan of that. Like growing up in Northport, that's one of our, you know, especially after losing Kentuck, I hate to, you know, tear open old wounds on that one. But Dickens Downtown is inextricably Northport as Kentuck is too.
Right,
So,
right.
You know, it was really neat. You know, they had a great petting zoo. We took our kid out. It had a full-size camel. You know, we love that. That was something
Okay.
new this year.
That is new.
You know, and getting to support Dad dressed up as Ebenezer Scrooge and make fun of him, you know, from 30 yards away while they did the tree lighting. That was special that we got to spend as our first Dickens Downtown, you know, with him in office. So, but it was great. I hope that they keep building on the event because I mean, you could just tell, especially like with the kids that get brought in there, like how magical that is to them. And that really is just such a part of the allure for historic downtown.
It is.
And it's not something, you know, that I'm definitely one of these people who would like to see more, you don't want to say development, but more diversity downtown. You know, that
Yes.
I'm like the loudest voice for like an independent bookstore,
Right.
like a coffee shop,
Right.
maybe a brew pub, you know,
Yeah.
like maybe Bo over at Druid City could like do like a little satellite
Sure.
pub, you know, in downtown. You know, nothing raucous that like brings in college kids, but something for folks like people in
Right.
their 30s, you know,
Right.
that don't necessarily want to shop at the Five and Dime or a toy
Yeah.
store,
Right.
you know, that like actually want to get out and spend their money. And I think that an event like Dickens Downtown that's perfectly suited for it.
Sure.
So you get people walking on the sidewalks, going in shops, and then that goes to like developing the whole riverfront too.
Right.
There's just so much potential there that I feel like, you know, that I know I said that earlier. The growth for growth's sake is the raison d'etre for a cancer cell, but we don't need to think that way. That especially when we're wanting to keep growing the way that we are and attract people again my age to come live in Northport, like we need to get away from this bedroom community mentality. But again, there's got to be a balance there. Again, does that look like a $350 million water park? I don't think so. But does it look like, you know, a ghost town that shuts down at 7:30 every night,
Right.
other than Billy's?
Right.
You know, I think there's some kind of, you know, happy medium Goldilocks zone there.
That's right.
Bookstore, record store would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem I think has always been it's just a small footprint, but there's available land. I know when we were there, when I had a part of a gallery there a long time ago. It was really just like basically a block. So if you weren't on that block, no one seemed to find you. But
And there's been kind of this prevailing attitude for, I don't know, probably about the last 25, 30 years that we want to keep it like it was.
Yeah,
And I get that if it would have been 20, 30 years ago.
But
That
now,
you're
yeah,
nostalgic for
right.
the Five and Dime or
Right.
for City Cafe, places like
Yeah.
that. But tastes change. Like what people want out of their walkable communities changes. You know, I'm not saying to, again, level it and just put in a bunch of college bars, but I just think there's so much more we could be doing with it if we wanted to stand out from the folks across the river. Instead of the reason we stand out is being a bedroom community where
Right.
we're closed by 8 o'clock.
Right. Well, one of the things I always thought instead of, or in addition to Dickens Downtown, would be to have like a Southern Writers Conference there. And I mean, it was just like, well, the Dickens thing kind of worked with the Christmas story and so on. But there's some literary things that could be fun, and just it would be, I thought, kind of an easier thing to stage.
And you know, a kind of tip of the hat to them that they have been hosting, I think last year might have been the first year they did it, the West Alabama Food and Wine Festival.
Yes.
I think that's great. Like if we're looking for something to
Right.
supplement, I mean, that's certainly not going to supplement the lost sales tax revenue that Kentucky brought.
Right.
But at least shows there's an effort,
Right.
you know, to give people something in that area, you know, that they can call their own. So, you know, maybe more events like that too. But I don't know, the boozing doesn't seem to register, or not register, but to make too many of the older set happy. So
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a hard, who knows? We'll just kind of keep doing our thing. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about was there's been a controversial decision by the University of Alabama, Roll Tide.
Tide.
I'm obligated to say it that way.
Roll Tide.
To close two student publications, Alice in 1956. So you were very involved with teaching and were involved with some of the students. So I would like, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, no, it kind of came as a big shock because, you know, that I think somebody pointed out in one of our petitions that, you know, I signed a petition along with, I think, 80 other alumni who had worked in student media. And I was a contributing writer at the Crimson White, you know, wrote some of the first, like, really big, like, hard news stories in my journalism career for that newspaper. So it's very, very close to my heart, you know, but I'm also on the board, the student media planning board that hires the student managers for
Okay.
these publications. And it's a volunteer thing. It's not like I'm getting paid for it or exert any kind of influence. You know, we have a really diverse board. You know, not just diverse in terms of like races and backgrounds, but of thought. You know, I mean, some of our debates we have are great. But in seeing the opportunities that these magazines gave our students, it was fantastic. Like that's what we should be in the business of doing as educators or as, you know, a journalism department, of offering as wide a range of opportunities for these kids as possible. Because not every kid, you know, one of the big stories I wrote about when I was at the Crimson White years ago was the Westboro Baptist Church.
Oh, wow.
When they came
Okay.
to Tuscaloosa.
I remember that.
You know, they said that the tornado was caused because of our homosexual love for football. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
But you know, I loved getting to cover a story like that. But that's not what every kid wants out of
Right.
this business.
Right.
And you know that some kids might be really passionate about writing or storytelling, but not everybody should have to be forced to do it in the same medium. But you know the memo that came down from the DOJ, and I'm being as apolitical about this as I can, regardless of my personal thoughts on it. But the DOJ memo that came down this summer really was a set of guidelines that, you know, just for the readers at home, that any of this diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI has become one of the biggest straw men, scapegoats in the cultural zeitgeist. But it's being used to, coercion is probably a strong word at this point because nobody's being forced. And that's kind of the whole point of me bringing this up, is that the guidelines basically said if you violate any of these terms, you could have your federal funding pulled. Well, you know, UA being, you know, the beneficiary of the amount of federal funding it gets, you know, what appears to have happened is that there was never a federal directive to the university that was like, you have to stop 1956 and Alice because they violate anti-discrimination laws. That never happened. What it seems like was a preemptive decision by the university but none of the rationale as to why that decision was made was spelled out. Because, I mean, for those at home who don't know, 1956 is probably, of the two, a bit more of the one you would assume would be the one that throws up red flags, because it's a magazine just dedicated to our black student population, gives them a space for any kind of creativity. They want to do any kind of storytelling. Again, with a university, I mean, it's embedded in its name that
Right.
why this magazine was created.
I mean, it's almost unbelievable that they would go after
And I mean,
that.
you look
Right.
at Alabama's history. I grew up in Tuscaloosa, so I'm not some kind of Yankee interloper saying
Sure.
this. The civil rights movement is as ingrained in our institution's history as anything, as
And-
Alabama football.
And we should celebrate it.
We should, and you know, in having a magazine like 1956, I think all of the people who've ever participated with it would say that honors that legacy.
Yes.
Of equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know,
Which are
like
not bad
all of
things.
these
They're-
terrible tenets.
Yeah.
You know, but then you look at Alice, which is basically a lifestyles magazine. I know a lot of national media, a lot of pundits have wanted to call it a women's magazine. I don't view it as such because we never, I think men have contributed to it. It's not as on the nose to just call it a women's magazine. I think that's a little bit short-sighted, ham-fisted, you know, that's not what that magazine is. But if you're looking at it from 40,000 feet, it's just a little girly girl magazine. You know, when you don't take the time to look at the types of opportunities it's offering, the types of kids that are working their ass off on both of these publications, that it just, to me, I'm still waiting for, I've reached out to the powers that be, and I got kind of a long watered down quote for the stories I wrote about it. But just to explain the rationale as to why these two magazines were chosen. You know, I saw somebody post, well, why not just take the softball team away? And I can't say I don't disagree with them. The softball team wins, though. So that's, you know, probably a reason why nobody wants to point their finger at them. But to me, it's really no different.
I mean, if we're going to do away with Title IX, okay, you know, that's what, it was hard fought. Like, I mean, I was the beneficiary of Title IX for women's sports, and by the time in high school, so I could participate in cross country, because before then, they didn't have, you know, a girls team. And that was back in the dark ages, but
We're old ladies. after
yeah,
all.
because we are old ladies. But I mean, you know, to just assume if it's for women or for girls, it's wrong. I'm
But
like,
yeah.
we are like a big part of the population after all.
And you know, some of this, and we've really seen it kind of in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, that now more than ever, especially at our institutions of higher learning, that it is more precarious now to speak your mind on either side of
Right.
the political. And I'm being apolitical
Sure,
saying that.
you're just reporting.
And I mean, we're seeing that with folks speaking out about the two magazines. That you know, I've seen several folks that, you know, I'm just kind of surprised at the level of. You don't want to call somebody a bigot, so I'm not going to. But just the level of misunderstandings that we have about each other's political sides in all this, and it's kind of spilling over into the classroom now. You know, I had a friend who had made some kind of, you know, half-handed remark about the whole Charlie Kirk stuff, and I mean, you had Tommy Tuberville calling for him to get fired.
Right.
You know, so it really is scary times, like in higher education, because now that I think there are so many people who want to speak out about the two magazines, and now they're maybe a little bit more timid too. I don't care. That I'm an adjunct instructor there that teaches a lab. I don't even teach a full class. And I mean, it's my alma mater. Like I
Right.
put in a post that regardless of its history or with this going down, I love that institution more than probably any other institution in this country. Like, I'm more proud to be associated with that institution than any. So to me, it's something worth fighting for. When I
Yes,
see
yeah.
that something, because it's bigger than just the university. It's a college of ideas, right? And that's where I do feel the need to speak up when I see something that I think my university could do better.
Well, and I think you can see journalists and journalism under attack worldwide, but also in this country, and it's basically an attack on it
Right.
by the university.
And, just couching it as though the feds were breathing down their necks, that we're about to cut your federal fund. That university makes money hand over
Right,
fist.
and they were not.
To me, that seems like they were just trying to get out in front of something, which is fine if that's your PR strategy, whatever. It's not my place to criticize it. But, I mean, it was just very clear from the anatomy of this whole scandal that there were no directives given. There were guidelines that were interpreted and then acted upon. But, and who'd that come at the expense of? It came at the expense of our students.
Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like we fail as an institution of higher learning when we put fear of the federal government over the opportunities we should be offering our students. So.
All right. Well, the next topic that I thought we could talk about was some of the crime reporting that you do, and some of the more in-depth things. But one article that caught my eye was about a young 19-year-old who was in trouble for shooting the mother's boyfriend, and this was in Lamar County. So it kind of had an unusual outcome, maybe, but or as far as I could tell from the article. So go ahead and fill us in on the details.
Well, it's one of those, like, how much time you got, buddy? That
All the time you want.
It's a really interesting judicial circuit. I think a lot of people are under the assumption that, like the Tuscaloosa District Attorney's Office is going to prosecute cases the same way the 24th Judicial Circuit,
Sure.
which it's a much smaller district. It covers Lamar, Fayette, Pickens. I think that might be it. I think it recently changed. But anyways, it's a multi-county circuit that really doesn't have near the kind of volume of like violent crime that we do here. So granted, their funding's not going to be as good, whatever. But to tell the story of this case, it's really interesting because we had another case recently where a guy who had been locked up for sex crimes, his last name's Vess Benton, which got a lot of headlines because the judge over there had released him early.
Okay.
That he had I think 3 victims, and 2 of the 3 victims' families, and he was in Hubbardville, had come out and said, well, we're fine with him getting an early release because of some things going on in prison that I'm not really like privy to,
Sure.
or can't really talk about without divulging sources. But he was going through a particularly rough time. Suffice it to say,
I understand.
in prison. He was being
Right.
extorted for money and stuff like that. So he gets released early, and that case absolutely blows up in the judge's face. They end up calling him back. I don't know. He ended up getting called to Tuscaloosa County for a hearing. Just a big mess and all that. So then we have this case of Marquise Gunter. He's 18 at the time. I think he turned 19 in the last year. That he had shot his mama's boyfriend. He had no prior criminal record. The mama and boyfriend were both admittedly had long rap sheets, boyfriend especially. And it was kind of like a question of self-defense, like from the very beginning. But the bond that if we need to take a break, we can.
No, that's okay. He'll come back. Or you can listen. Have a seat. Okay.
He'll be the audience.
Yeah. This is
we
our
have
friend.
a live.
This is our friend Steve Davis. He's the sculptor.
Hey, I was just commenting on your tree. Yes, sir.
He's the other Steve Davis. So okay, not right this one. So okay. So sorry. We'll keep going.
But yeah, Marquise Gunter. Yeah, he's 18, 19 years old, or he's 19 now, but he's 18 at the time of the shooting. That his mom's boyfriend, his mom too, both had drug problems, long rap sheets, and it depends on who you ask. This is a fascinating case study in the sense that the narrative on social media became the prevailing narrative, which again, it happens every day with big cases. But what was so interesting to me as a case study with this is that the district court set his bond, again, no prior criminal record, his first offense, set his bond at $750,000, which is astronomical.
It's just
like I've never seen a bond set that high in like an attempted murder case,
right.
And he was charged with like assault 1, so it wasn't even,
right.
On that scale. So there was a lot of like grassroots advocacy that came out through that. A lot of people wanting the judge to reconsider his bond. They even had an immunity hearing. I don't think it was an immunity hearing. I think it might have been a bond hearing early last week where the judge wouldn't come off it. But they ended up working a plea deal out where the kid basically gets out on probation. That it really, in terms of a deal, I mean, he's going to be a convicted felon, but if he gets his GED, goes through anger management, that, the state wouldn't stand in the way of him getting a full pardon. So really, I mean, I've covered plenty of kids getting thrown to the wolves,
Right.
at 16, 17 years old.
Right.
So I was fairly impressed with, the level of lawyering that must have gone into working that deal out. Well, in terms of looking at this from like as a cultural case study, that wasn't enough. Like the podcaster world, no offense, I know we're on a podcast, but the true crime.
We have a good podcast.
Like there was a lot, and I mean, I'm not going to say that the animosity wasn't deserved, but I think that there was a lot more that the public that had really followed this case wanted to be done on it. And I'm not sure that there was anything outside of a full exoneration that you could give it.
Sure.
And he had already admitted, I talked to his attorney, which again, if you talk to the people on the outside, they don't believe any of this, so that's fine. It's whatever. That I'm just reporting what was told to me. That the kid and his mama had kind of corroborated a story of what had happened in the beginning, and then when all the evidence came out at trial, which it has a way of doing, that then the kid, after he took the stand too in his own defense, to testify, I think he realized that the story had fallen apart. That one of the things that really stood out to me in this is that, I mean, the guy that he shot was unarmed, but he shot him twice. Like, I asked the attorney, I was like, how many times did you shoot him? He's like, we shot him twice.
Yeah.
I was like, well, normally when you're just trying to defend yourself, you're going to shoot somebody once. Generally, you shoot him twice, you want him dead.
Right.
And he's like, well, when I asked him, he's like, why'd you shoot him the second time? He's like, because he didn't go down the first time.
Right. So
it's a bit different of a story than you're just defending yourself.
Right.
So, but do I think that, that the boyfriend was abusive and had probably contributed to this set of circumstances that led to him getting shot? Probably so. But what was interesting in all this, though, is I used that Vest Benton case to kind of, prelude this, that the judge in that case was under so much pressure. I mean, everybody in that circuit admitted to me that sentence that he gave Marquise Gunter in that case was the direct result of all the pressure he'd gotten from another case. So that, to me, I would argue, is that justice in that district isn't necessarily as blind as it is reactionary. And that, to me, is kind of scary.
It is.
I just think about, and that's what I try to put myself in that mind anytime I cover criminal proceedings, is like if I'm sitting in that chair.
Right.
Or, vice versa, if I'm the family of the person that was hurt sitting on the opposite side, how would I, think about things? And that's what I would be, again, the kid could be celebrating that he got an easy sentence, but it was because another case had gone so poorly.
Right.
So again, justice isn't so much blind in that district.
That's it's good to be aware of it. There's a lot more that goes on than people from the outside know, and I think there is. For a lot of people, they think it's very cut and dried. Like you do something wrong, you go to jail. It's all there's consequences that are very spelled out, which is not the case at all. And what we consider criminal and what we consider not criminal is very gray area.
That's what I have to remind myself too, is that justice does not care about my feelings.
Right.
The 12 people sitting in that jury box sure as hell don't care about my feelings. And that's where I think in this world of like, which again, I love true crime. It's my favorite genre of anything, but it is really like evolved the way that we view criminal proceedings from the outside.
Right.
They used to be, Law and Order, if you go back and watch it, it's not that far off of a show from the way that things are. But now with just the deluge, and I'm talking about Law and Order like 30 years ago, but now with like the deluge of internet sleuths and, solving crimes in 30 minutes in a podcast, that I think there's a lot that gets lost in like what these like massive criminal cases, like what goes into them.
And they take years often. So.
Absolutely. Like we had the case, I know I talked about it the last time I was on here with the Alabama basketball player, Darius Miles, that again, you wouldn't find a more staunch advocate for reconsideration of his charge than you will me.
Right.
But after going through the trial with his co-defendant, my perspective completely changed, because I mean, it went from, And that's why I said, like, the jury doesn't care about what your feelings
Right.
are. Like, the jury is there to interpret the evidence they were given and make a decision, render somebody guilty or not guilty, you know? And I was really surprised in that case with his co-defendant. It took him 30 minutes, like, to deliberate. You know, I've just worked on a child pornography trial that they deliberated for almost 2 days,
Yeah.
you know, on something that seemed as cut and dry, slam the book on it, you know.
But
So it's like you really don't know what's going through that jury's mind.
Right.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my recent, I guess, contact with the law in this country was I got to be a sketch artist at a trial.
wow.
It was a civil case, and I got hired by the defendants, and it was something that had taken place 5 years prior, and it finally was going to a jury trial.
Do you still have the sketches?
I don't, because I gave them to the defendant. Yeah, and the jury deliberated for about 20 minutes before finding for the defendant. So
It's still exciting.
it was really fun. It was in at Jefferson County Courthouse in Bessemer. So I hope I get to do it again, because it was really interesting, because I got to see the whole procedures, the jury selection, you know, how the massive amounts of data they had for this. It was a very small case, and yet it was, you know.
And that goes back to folks really
Right.
do, I think that most, you know, like a capital murder case can be like open and shut in 30 minutes.
Right.
You know, just like they see on TV. So,
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is, the procedure is a very fascinating part of it to me. And it's also something that's like really changed the way that I approach covering things. Like especially with Michael Davis, you know, the co-defendant
Right.
Darius Miles's case, that I'd covered more murder trials before that than I could count, but that was the first one that really was like, maybe you don't know everything before it already happens. Because as a journalist, or at least somebody who's been doing this as long as I do, you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And you generally want to have the entire story mapped out before you ever have it written, right? There might be a few variables get sprinkled in here and there, but like you generally going into something have an idea of like A to Z how it's going to go. And that trial completely threw all that out the window. I would definitely encourage anybody to like leave your biases at the door when it comes to stuff like that.
Which is, you know, how we're always curious, we're always learning, and it's always good to like be surprised about something. So I'm surprised about at least one thing every day. So,
But we have another interesting case just for folks that are following local true crime, that we did finally have 2 arrests made in a double murder that we had on Old Fayette Road, which is around where I grew up. I actually went to a grade school with one of the victims. And that's one of those when they talk about stuff hitting close to home that, you know, a lot of my colleagues, and I have a few that are actually from here, but it is so much harder to cover a place that you grew up in for stories like that. You know, that again, this is the same unit investigating. It was where my dad worked as a homicide investigator. I've known a lot of these guys for years, you know, and then we get a case where it's somebody that you knew when you were in elementary school, you know.
yeah, that's really rough.
But that was one of those that a lot of people got upset with the way that it was handled. That when they found the first body at the beginning of a week, it was in late November now, October. Sorry, it's all my dates have kind of like bled together. But when they found the first victim, they came out and were like, you know, we're looking for a person of interest.
Right.
You know, Eric Bradley Thomas. He was named as a quote person of interest, and a lot of people immediately interpreted that to say that he was a suspect. Right. So you already have a lot of mistrust of the police, a lot of bad blood for how it's been painted, and then rock on 3 days later, and we find him tied up and executed in an abandoned house just a few miles away. But what was really interesting about this is one of the guys that was arrested has a rap sheet a mile long, and has been caught up in some of the most interesting crimes that I've seen. That I think he's been tried twice for a murder in Greene County, where a guy was shot and dumped in the Sipsey River up there. But to talk to people on the ground there, it was like that he had scared the jury so bad that nobody'd ever convict him. So
Wow.
Okay,
yeah,
well.
he's a bad guy, and then he had that and got caught up with, before all this, I didn't know that Forkland was incorporated, much less had a mayor.
I did not know that.
But he had apparently gotten caught up with the mayor of Forkland in a scheme to embezzle, I think, close to like $20,000 from the Alabama Black Mayors Association. And then the mayor ended up taking the fall on that. But he was indicted along with him on this guy isn't just your run-of-the-mill, criminal. Like, he's definitely involved with things that are a bit more advanced than...
It's not just, one bad decision here. This is...
No, it's very much about a 30-year trajectory of different offenses. But what blows my mind is how somebody that, if you talk to folks close to the situation, you talk to investigators, past and present, that they'll call this dude a monster up and down. It's like, well, why haven't we got him yet? That I'm all for, like, if you didn't do it, you shouldn't have to serve time for it. But
this one looks a little more,
to quote Ron White, I ain't never been accused of anything I didn't do. And it kind of seems to be the case with this guy. But I'm glad that they made 2 arrests in that case, and hopefully those families will have some justice, because that was one of the more strange. Like, I remember when I walked up on the second scene after they found Eric's body, I was talking with one of the homicide investigators. And when he came up, we've been through plenty together, so, he expected to see me there. But I was the only reporter who had shown up at that point. He just, had his head kind of hung and was like, I was like, well, I'm guessing y'all found him. He was like, this investigation is going to be one of the crazier that we've had. And he was right. I think it took, close to a month. So, which I'm glad that they made an arrest. But, I think they were on the guy's trail from the second day, because I'd written in some of my reporting that the guy that I was just talking about, who has a really long criminal record, when I found his, they had executed a search warrant at his house on Old Fayette Road, and when I looked up the address that was attached to the search warrant document, it was smack dab between the 2 scenes where they found the 2 bodies.
well, so...
You could walk to either
Right.
scene from where this guy lived. So that seemed pretty damning, but yeah, they were on him from the day after Eric's body was found. I think it's just one of those that piecing together all the evidence you needed to be able to try. And it's one of those, when you hear some of the details, that doesn't sound like a one-person job to me either.
Right.
So maybe it was piecing together who else could have been involved, other possible suspects, establishing a motive, But at the end of the day, we got 2 guys dead who, by all accounts, were good dudes. Their families loved them. Their friends loved them.
Yeah.
And it's
a
no
tragedy.
amount of justice will be able. That I covered the case or the sentencing for Audra Rogers, the woman who killed her in that car wreck 4 or 5 years ago. That again, she had her 4 kids with her. She's pregnant with a 5th kid. No amount of sentencing, no amount of justice you can exercise on that will ever heal what's happened. So the same thing with this case.
Right.
The brutality with which these 2 men were killed is terrible. No amount of justice you're going to be able to mete out to the 2 suspects will bring those guys back. So I just hope people, when folks hear me talking about it so nonchalantly, I don't want them to think that those families are lost on me, because that's right at the very front of my head.
Well, that's good to know. These are all human stories, and I think that's, understanding the people who are affected by it. And that's, I'm not a big fan of true crime, same thing. I don't like to really be entertained by people's tragedies, but at the same time, we all kind of want to know, well, who did that? We would solve the mysteries in that case. And you do feel like, well, if someone's out there murdering people, you need to find them and make them stop.
But it doesn't change gears, but to give us maybe something a little bit, it's Christmas time, right? We need something a little more optimistic.
Well, Christmas can be kind of scary, just like the Dickens that has, it's a ghost story.
I got plenty of folks I'd sick those ghosts on.
Me too.
Change some things before Christmas.
Me too.
That I had a story here recently that I wanted to give an update on that has just really been close to my heart. That they were serving a arrest warrant in Holt, I guess the very end of November, and while they were doing it, found a pit bull who had been tied up to an old car tire. This dog was it's nothing but skin and bones, eat up with parvo, just in terrible shape. And
Sheryl told Lorrie, when Ryan comes in, tell him he can't talk about the dog because Sheryl can't handle sad pet stories.
But it's a happy ending.
I've cried plenty, so we can cry through it again together.
All right, go on.
Lieutenant Susan Curvin at the Tuscaloosa Police Department, she's not normally just on animal control, stuff like that, but she has a huge heart for animals. And I'd never really worked with her on anything until all this happened. But she was the one that was called out to rescue this dog. And I'm telling you, you can go look at some of the stories I've written where I've included pictures when he was found, and it will rip your heart out. He's just laying in a dirt pit, had old pizza boxes thrown around him, didn't have no access to water. One of my buddies that I told him, I wouldn't quote him by name, but it was such a powerful thing he said. That he was like, the dog was just thrown on the ground like another piece of trash.
Yeah.
But Lieutenant Curvin, the folks at Metro took him in. It was real touch and go from the beginning. And the good thing, that I told my class this after the fact, that caring for a rescued animal, especially in this kind of situation, again, there were plenty of people who were like, why didn't the vets just donate the care?
No, they can't.
If they did that for one animal, they have to do it for all of them. And
they,
vets can't operate as a charity.
Right.
As bad as callous as that sounds, that's just the reality of the situation they're in. The parvo drugs, heartworm treatment, all that's really expensive.
Right.
So I immediately, got out front with it with my coverage. Nobody else seemed to pick it up. That was like, hey, they've renamed this dog Chance. He needs all this help. So if you feel so led, donate to McClendon Veterinary Clinic. And I think it was in the first 3 hours of my story, I think they had raised over $2,000.
That's wonderful.
So they were already ready to get him. They got him the parvo antibody injection, started him on his heartworm treatments. But the first few days were real. He couldn't keep fluids down. Didn't really have an appetite. And then eventually it was like he turned a corner. He started wanting wet food, stuff like that. And I posted a picture on Facebook of him last week that I think a week after they rescued him, he had gained 8 pounds back.
Wow.
He was eating. He's definitely in the clear. He's going to have a bunch of other treatment, things like that. But I think he's got in excess of $1,000 still left for his medical care. He's got a foster that's taking care of him. And I'd posted a picture of him when they did the outdoor siren test the other day of him wailing along with it. And that to me looks like a happy dog that, feels like he's being cared for.
Right.
So, it's like I told my students that it's like I get real down in the dumps this time of year that, it's easy to get down on yourself with the state of things. But I was like, you look at that story and tell me what we do doesn't make a difference.
That's right.
And that really kind of reinvigorated me at a time when I needed it. So.
And you were the only one who covered it. And so you were...
Other than Kelly at WVUA, I got to give her a shout out. She did a great job.
Okay, well, you were most involved in getting that money raised for the vet, because those folks who read that story you wrote are the ones who did it.
But that really, that reinvigorated my faith in humanity, but also in my profession, that it's easy to just be like, oh, nobody listens to anything I do. I can't make a difference. Yeah. And again, if it takes a story about a dog to make me realize that what I do does make a difference, then great.
Yeah.
But I've been keeping up with Chance ever since, and like I say, it seems like he's finally... it breaks my heart to say he's finally knowing what love feels like. So,
yeah. Wow, that is a good story.
And he's still in a foster situation, right?
He is, but it seems like that's going to end up turning into
probably his
because it needs to be somebody who can really take care of all of his medical stuff right now. Right.
Well, and understand that he's going to be a different type of dog since he's had a hard time. So,
but I got to meet him and. He had a little Disney eyes going. He was as sweet as he could be when I met him. I was outfitted because I have animals at home, so I was outfitted in like a Ghostbuster outfit. Sure. But he's wagging his tail, came up to me, and was very loving. So
that's a good story.
Yes, it is.
So, on that note, it's time to watch our shows.
Is it already?
It is.
All right, it's time to watch our shows.